Hi, Christina. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Laura. I'm so happy to be here with you.
So, I've been talking to Christina for the past 20 minutes, and I'm just so excited for us to get to know her and for her to share of her insights on November. But first, I wanted to ask you why the eighth house, and maybe that could be the segue into how you got to the eighth house from your origin story.
I love that. That's a great question. Yeah, I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you for sharing space with me. Yeah, so my astrology practice is named Eighth House Astrology, and it's kind of straightforward and simple, but my sun is in the astrological eighth house in the Placidus chart system, which is the chart system that I learned astrology on. And so when I was first encountering astrology, and this was back in like 2008 when I first got to college. I really started learning about it for my own kind of like personal growth and trying to figure myself out, being really captivated by the magic of astrology after having been a kid who really liked myths and fairy tales and painting and, all of the things that are creative and non-productive in society. But I always knew that I was a Virgo, and I do identify with that because I am pretty conscientious, a little bit neurotic, very able to critique things. I'm very, I think, cerebral. I really love reading and writing and talking. But there is a little bit of a shadow component to, I would say, my identity and my experience that's pretty strong. And so when I learned that my son was in the eighth house, I was like, damn, okay, this makes sense. I am here. Astrology, you've got me. This is it. And so the astrological eighth house, right? All of the houses in our natal charts, just I guess for anybody who's like, what's a house? Anybody, looking at their chart, we have the circle comprised of these 12 slices with the planets inside. And each of those houses talks about a different field of experience or kind of area of focus in life. And so the eighth house is all about the personal underworld. So we have things like human psychology, being interested in the occult, being interested in what lies beneath the surface. Also being in relationships where power dynamics are really highlighted. Also being in, situations where we're receiving gifts from people and there's a little bit of I would say, again, like a power situation that's very central. So, understanding that, I am super curious about spirituality, the occult, and what makes people who they are, the psychological aspect of it. And so, yeah, that is why I named my business Eighth House Astrology. And because of that, I draw a lot of people with eighth house placements to me because magic is real. Yes. Magic is real, and when you name something, then it inhabits that energy. So I have cultivated this practice where I really do feel like I get to help people connect with what is beneath the surface in their own chart and in their own personal underworld. So and it's not so dark, it doesn't have to be so intense, but it's very important for me for this work to be deep and purposeful and supportive ultimately to whoever comes to me. So that's that. Yeah, that's that perspective.
And what is your moon and your rising, if you don't mind me
Yeah,
asking?
of course. Of course. I am a Virgo sun, Capricorn rising, Gemini moon. So,
Wow,
um,
double
mhm,
Mercury.
yes, double Mercury. And then that Cap rising with the Virgo sun is super earthy. And yeah, I really feel like an embodiment of Mercury a lot of days, but I also have Neptune perfectly conjunct my ascendant. So I feel like that's the sort of other maybe ethereal sort of thing that draws me around the world, around my life. And yeah, so those are my placements.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you said that because I didn't even realize that I do now that I have my North Node in the eighth house. And
Mm.
I just noticed that people with eighth house placements are attracted to each other because it's a very magnetic place in our chart. And actually, it's amazing that this worked out on this day because we are talking during Scorpio season and the eighth house was Scorpio. So I feel like this was meant to be.
I love it. I totally love it. And yeah, I think it is such a magnetic place. And that's the kind of interesting thing about the eighth house or eighth house situations. We're kind of like drawn in on a very subtle level. And it takes a lot of self-knowledge and discernment to kind of be able to say, this is why this is happening in my life. And, you know, yeah, it's definitely a very, I just love that idea about it being a magnet for experiences of a particular kind. Love it.
Yeah, I was talking to my mom this morning about sex and death, and I'm like, this is eighth house topics. This is
Yes.
Scorpio topics, because I was saying that there's three things people don't want to talk about: sex, death, and money. But also, I would say politics in there now with other things. But I feel that these are things that are so paramount to our livelihood and lives, and it's seen as taboo and it's seen as like, oh, we can't talk about this because it's going to make people uncomfortable. But these are the things that are so important in our experience.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting how the most critical, most impactful stuff is stuff that we kind of tend to sweep under the rug. I'm gonna knock my water over here. So sorry about that. Yeah, it's totally part of the weird experience of being a human, that we kind of avoid what is necessary and highlight what is completely not necessary a lot of the time. So that's the other reason why the eighth house can be such a fertile topic of conversation for people, because it's cathartic to talk about the stuff that's in there. If you have planets in there, it might actually be hard for you to excavate that on your own, because planets that are in the eighth house are in aversion to the ascendant, meaning they are out of sight from the ascendant point. And so it's great to be able to work with a psychologist or any kind of counselor, or, you know, a Reiki practitioner, an acupuncturist, or an astrologer or a diviner to kind of get under what is really there. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I whenever I meet somebody new, because I also have Jupiter in Scorpio in the 12th, I'm always like, what are your wounds?
Yes.
Who hurt you as a child? And people are always like, oh.
And I'm like here for that. So yes, I love it. And I know, yeah, Jupiter in the 12th, it's so spiritual. It's so, and I mean, that's a very broad word. It's very, I would say there are occult gifts when we have Jupiter in the 12th, and also being of service,
Yes.
to people who are in need is going to be a really beautiful kind of, mundane manifestation of Jupiter in the 12th. I like that placement.
Yeah. It definitely helps me to um, be with people in their hard times and in their fears, and I'm not afraid of that, which I feel like is a gift as a human being.
Mhm.
But enough about me. I want to know, because I also found you because you either author or you do the illustrations for Celestial Bodies, a tarot deck, which I'm obsessed with. I'm obsessed with. I saw it on YouTube from a tarot reader, and I asked my mom to buy it for me for Christmas.
Oh.
Like, I want it so badly, and it's just so beautiful, and the imagery is so like almost like Pisces, like Neptune, very expansive and very psychedelic. So how did you get into art? And you also say you're a poet.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, the Celestial Bodies Oracle is this, you're totally right, this like incredible art, astrology, numerology oracle deck made by Devaney Amber Wolf, who is the artist who made the She-Wolf Tarot and the Serpent Fire Tarot decks. And so she approached me a while ago, I think in 2019, to write the guidebook for that deck. So that's my contribution, in addition to advising on like the production of the images, which are all of the components of astrology. Every planet, house, sign, element, aspect formation, what else is in there, the modalities. There's just one card for each of these ideas, illustrating them so that people can really become familiar with the concepts of astrology. That's how Devaney wanted to create this initially. I think she thought that it would be like a learning tool, kind of like laying cards out, looking at the images, meditating with them, and then reading about it in a book to understand your own chart. And then the way that the deck has come to life, it's a totally viable divination tool. Like I use it like I would use a tarot card, deck. And so it's pretty lovely. But we worked on that in 2019 together. And the guidebook itself, which is like, my super proud contribution to this project, is a kind of in-depth, like everything you need to know about every single component, again, of the planets, the signs, the houses, and gives you some beautiful ways to work with them, thinking through either the perspective of looking at your own chart and finding your own placements. There are mantras to work with in there that are very, I think, poetic and nice to just keep with you as an embodiment of that, of like a planet's energy, for example. But yeah, so that's that. And, we worked on this in 2019. The pandemic hits in the spring of 2020, when really we're thinking we're going to be able to get this out into the world. And we just hit all of these production snags. And so it took until this spring to bring it to fruition. And it's just been such a journey in that way, but it's incredible. So yeah, it's here now. And I hope that you love it. It's really,
Beautiful.
it's super special. Yeah.
It's beautiful. And how did you get into art,
Mm,
art history? And
yeah.
how do you like, I don't know if you do this on purpose, but you like kind of interplay it with astrology.
Okay. So this is such a hard question to answer because I've just always like been drawn to art, and specifically visual art. When I was little, I was all children I think are artists, right? So that was like a big deal for me, though. I was very into my like paints and pastels and my art classes and stuff like that. It was very much who I identified as a child, which is just funny, like such a Virgo thing. Like I am this person when I'm like 9. Like, oh, okay, good for you. You got a ways to go. And so, that was always very important to me. When I got, again, to college, I studied literature and art history. So I just have an educational background in it, but it's such an important part of my day to day just because it's nourishing. And so, when you care about something, you can become quite obsessed with it. And I'm very, very drawn to the ways that art forms like poetry and painting and music overlap with, our lived experiences and act as, I don't know, some kind of like confirmation of the divine. That's really what I feel about art, is that we're kind of working with intelligences that are beyond us, but are part of us. And we're kind of letting them flow through us if we're writing a poem or making a song or a painting. So yeah, it's just very important to me. I feel like there is so much overlap as well between astrology and art, because astrology is really a series of archetypal concepts
Mhm.
that we find in all of life, but they're very distilled. And art is also a kind of like distillation of archetypal energies, color, image, symbol, all those things. And so in studying, art history, it's inevitable that you come across the imagery of astrology, because artists have always been interested in the stars. Poets have always been writing hymns to Aphrodite, and trying to do magic with the cosmos. So I feel like I'm just part of whatever that lineage is, unconsciously or consciously. Yeah.
I love your art history background because I didn't go to school for art because my parents wouldn't allow me to. Again, immigrant parents, but I had a private tutor from the age of 8 to 18, so 10 years. I went every Saturday to art school, art studio, and even now when I need to like get into that like Piscean Neptunian phase, I go to the Met for 4 hours and just like escape, and it just brings me into a different like perception of life.
Mhm.
And it could be escapism, but I feel like a healthy escapism.
It's a good escapism. It's an escapism we need, like I think that it's the healthiest form of it because it's putting us in touch again with like something human and something kind of essential. Every culture has art, every culture, and every period of time has had, an art of its own. And it's just so interesting. So, I would love to go to the Met right now with you because that's also like my happy place. Not so much MoMA. Like I used to love MoMA as a I guess like younger person, but the Met just has like all of my heart at this point in my life.
Has an
So
energy to it.
it's a special place. It's super special. Yeah.
So if there was a artist or a piece that could describe Scorpio season, and I will try to remember to search for it and post it somewhere, maybe in your blog post, but does anything come to mind?
God, that's such a great question, and I don't know if I can answer it. Um, I feel like, oh my gosh. I feel like the work of like Francis Bacon and Haim Soutine is very Scorpio.
Mhm.
And so they're kind of all like, paintings of like bodies and meat and storms. And I think that that is extremely scorpionic. I also think that certain paintings of Leonora Carrington's can be very, very much of the Scorpio archetype, but I should like play around and search and see if
Okay.
I can show you something too. Yeah, that's just off the top of my head. My favorite Scorpio artist is definitely Björk because she's a triple Scorpio and she is
Hmm.
just like amazing in so many
So is
ways.
Katy Perry.
I know, I always find that very funny, but
So not the archetype that
well,
I would expect, right?
I know. I think that that's the funny thing about celebrity charts. It's like, they're really great tools to study and like learn and see how a chart works, but we don't know these people. Like maybe she's
Right,
scorpionic behind the scenes.
right,
I don't know. I don't
right.
know.
That's true. And as we were saying before, Scorpios are magnetic people.
Mhm.
And it's there's a depth to them that we might not see, but somehow we keep going back to her music and she's always around.
I know, it's so true. That's so funny. Yeah, totally, totally.
Yeah. Well, shall we talk about November? What are some of your ideas and feelings and themes of this month?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I think that this month is definitely a little bit of a cosmic turning point. We are in Scorpio season as of, right now. The latter portion of the month will draw us into Sagittarius season, which is another kind of, welcome Jupiterian turn of the wheel. But this particular month is going to bring us our first of the Taurus eclipses that will wind up characterizing so much of 2022's astrology. And so this month, we're kind of looking at a very potent window into what's kind of up ahead. And so, yeah, do you want to talk about like the nodes a little bit and where they've been
Yes.
and the eclipses? Okay.
Because I feel
Um,
like, sorry to interrupt.
oh, yes.
Personally, for me, these nodes, so I went from a nodal return to then this, with the South Node being in my first house, and I'm like, I just need a break.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So is this, I have a feeling that it's going to be rough for some people and a little bit easier for some.
It really depends on how your chart is configured and how that archetypal binary of the signs that I was going to say, where has this been impacting you? Obviously, Sag rising, it's been in your first house. So that means the North Node has been in your seventh house, and that's going to have put so much of an emphasis on your daily life, on like other people and their needs. And, boundary work also would have been very important with this transit for the past year plus. And so also with, the South Node in Sagittarius, I've been kind of talking about it as a way of releasing, dogmatic views that we have about our life or about the world. But releasing deeply held beliefs can be really triggering. And so it's not been like sunshine and roses to be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to change my perspective. Like that's really hard work. It's not cool to have to do that. So it's been interesting. I think the North Node in Gemini this year has brought a huge focus to the concept of local community and what it means to live in our local spaces because of the pandemic, because of us being kind of, confined to walks around the block or, not really reaching out, not traveling as much, right? The South Node in Sag, like that's a decrease, that's South Node of travel, Sagittarius. So it's just been a very interesting time. Interesting, yeah, it's been complicated for a lot of people. Ugh, yeah, I had the South Node on my ascendant, the eclipse series prior when we had
Mhm. Yes.
the Cap.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh, that one was rough.
that was really tough because I mean, like Gemini Sag is kind of like mental, right? It's like about our how we have ideas, how we talk, how we move around, how we conceptualize the world. The Cancer Capricorn binary is like nurture and structure and like, maternal instinct versus the shadow of the paternal instinct. It's like some rough stuff was elicited by all of that. So yeah. And then on my ascendant. But for anybody listening, I really think that, the South Node eclipses in my first house pulled away a lot of old material that I was holding on to about who I am. And
Yes.
it was when I really fully stepped into my astrology practice. Like I got a huge shove from the universe being like, there are no other options right now. You're going to do this thing. And it was very scary because I had been practicing, I've studied astrology since about 2008. So a long time, but only really publicly offering my services since 2016. And so that eclipse series was like, you've been practicing long enough. You need to be this. You need to take this step. It was also my Saturn return, so it was super
Wow.
complicated. Yeah,
Which is
yeah,
rules Capricorn. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, super, super, super intense. So the eclipses, they get to do this fantastic thing of working us over in a very unexpected way. And like, in all kinds of astrology practices or occult practices, when there's a full moon or a new moon, we're like, oh, we can manifest, we can release, we can prepare. With eclipses, it's traditionally the case that we don't do anything because it's beyond our control. It's a moment where the cosmos is taking over, the light of the sun or the moon is darkened. And so it's thought of as like a kind of moment where we need to take a step back and not try to control every magical outcome, which can be really hard, again, to not like set an intention. I think can be a little bit exposing to us if we're used to moving with those cycles. So, the yeah, that's all here. Yeah. How do you feel about that? Like, do you have an eclipse practice that you like to make use of, or do you just kind of observe how you're feeling during that time?
Yeah, I think that the nodes to me, I call them the nodes of fate because I track back to every eclipse that I could remember, and every eclipse took something away and brought something in.
Mhm.
Whether it was a person, a job, or something significant happened. So now, having awareness about that, I kind of just sit back and just allow the universe to do its thing because obviously it's faded.
Mhm.
90% of the time, it's something that I'm holding on to because I'm afraid. And and I think that every eclipse that has been through a major, major house of mine where something significant happened, it was for the better.
Yeah.
I do have to say that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so fascinating. Like that North Node is about like moving towards a destination, but it's a destination that's kind of like a long-term
Mhm.
destination. It's not like that year, you know, although things can happen like that. But it really is interested in helping us meet our own fate, which is like, you know, no big deal. It's
Mhm.
pretty intense. And then the South Node is like a vacuum, right? In this way where it takes stuff away. And so, like in Vedic astrology, the North Node is configured as the dragon's head, and the South Node is represented as the dragon's tail. And both of them are like consuming or destroying and like, you know, kind of like pushing forward, but they have their own styles. And so, I guess for anybody listening who's like, what do eclipses have to do with the nodes? I should say that eclipses are noted when a full moon or a new moon is happening really close to the north or south node. And so that's how we know when eclipses are going to happen. And I, yeah, feel like that should be made
Yeah.
clear.
Thank
Mhm.
you for giving us the 101 astrology lesson. So with the North Node going into Taurus and it's the first eclipse,
Mhm.
what are some themes that as collectively our lesson we are moving towards, and also individually, obviously you have to look at your individual house.
Mhm. Right. So, you know, the North and South Node do such a great um, job, I would say, for the collective of showing us the direction that we're kind of pointed, our all of us are in totality pointed in. So, with the North Node moving into Taurus, we're kind of entering this maybe opportunity of reacquainting ourselves with what it really means to embody Taurus energies, which to me are really standing in your values and standing in your morals and kind of discerning your own boundaries and philosophies of life. It's also, I would say, and I hope, an invitation to kind of re-meet pleasure because Taurus is ruled by Venus. And so, you know, relearning or maybe reforming our relationship to somatic experiences, pleasure, passion, consumption, are all things that are going to kind of be highlighted. So, you know, maybe in culture, there'll be some like foodie stuff happening or something silly like that. But overall, it's important to realize too that the environment is so much a signifier or signified by Taurus. And so we're in this period of time where we're seeing a lot of environmental chaos because of climate change and things that are really the product of like, you know, consuming without morals. And so I think that we're going to start having a lot of conversations too about what all of that looks like. So yeah, that's kind of that's what I'm sensing about what's up ahead.
And then the South Node in Scorpio.
Yeah. And so the nodes are always opposite. So they're always in these pairs. And the Scorpio South node is going to be interesting because the South node is the kind of point that brings out the shadow side of a sign. And like, you know, Scorpio is shadowy enough already. And so I'm curious personally to see what's the shadow of the shadow. Like that's the crazy thing. You know, South Node Scorpio, I think could be really revelatory of like abuses of power or where, you know, resources are going and being hoarded, for example, kept from the public. On a less intense note, though, like maybe a personal sort of manifestation of this might be, you know, really meeting the shadow and being introduced to deeper components of ourselves that are asking for integration so that we can receive and so that we can be in alignment with, you know, who we're supposed to be. So I think personally, you know, the collective themes are pretty big because this world is complicated and vast and on its own track. But as individuals, I would love to see the kind of embrace of pleasure with the Taurus North Node and the embrace of like, you know, care for the earth once again in a real way. With the North Node in Taurus and then with the South Node in Scorpio, it's going to be a shadow work opportunity in a really big way. So
Yes.
easier said than done, but I
Yes.
feel like it's here.
Yes. And also, I feel it's an opportunity for people to, because Uranus is in Taurus, it's an opportunity for people to break free of however they feel trapped and stuck, because these are fixed signs. And
Mm.
so, I feel like it's going to be interesting to see like how this plays out, because I know a lot of people like the Taurus comfort because Taurus is like, their creature habits, and not like not dragging the Tauruses who are listening, but yeah, Taurus is the thing that I love about them is they live in the moment. They live with their five senses, and what you were saying about pleasure. I think of like Winnie the Pooh wearing his crop top and eating honey and like enjoying life.
That's so cute. He would be a tourist, wouldn't he? He's kind of
I
just
think
like does his thing. Oh, that's so sweet. And I love Tauruses. I really I admire them. I love their like their aesthetic sensibility sometimes is just like out of this world.
yeah.
But yeah, I think that that's so sweet. I love that.
Was there anything specifically you wanted to touch on the eclipses, or do you want to start going through some of the transits?
So I actually have a note, so I'm going to move my window and I'm going to look at it.
Hey.
I think that the most important thing to highlight about the eclipse in Taurus are just a couple of details, right? So it's going to be a full moon, a lunar eclipse in Taurus. So that's when the sun is in Scorpio and the moon is in Taurus. This happens every year in Scorpio season, but at this point, we're in eclipse time, and it's going to be happening at 27 degrees Taurus. So if anybody has any points or planets, or if it's your ascendant or your descendant around 27 Taurus, check that out. It's probably going to be impacted by this eclipse. And I think that that is a very important takeaway just for understanding how it's impacting your own chart and your own life. So yeah, keep that in mind.
Mhm.
Yeah. A little beetle in here. Oh God. Okay. So yeah, and then regarding, the kind of planetary placements, we're going to be thinking all about, the South Node and the North Node. Like they're not yet in Taurus and Scorpio. They're actually going to officially move into those signs in January of 2022. But this is going to be a kind of like wrapping up of a bigger narrative with the nodes still in Gemini and Sag, and then the eclipse happening in Taurus itself.
Hmm,
Hmm.
amazing.
Hmm.
And the last of that series is December 4th, I believe. It's a
Yes.
solar eclipse.
Yep. So, yep. The
Yeah.
last one will be in Sagittarius. Totally correct. Yep. And then we move into Taurus Scorpio land. So that's that.
Amazing.
Hmm. 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 Um, so that's, yeah, I think it's going to be, we're all kind of moving through interesting territory right now. Um, there are some other cool things that are happening in November if you want to talk about
Yeah.
planetary ingresses. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, for I think all of us, like the full moon and the new moon are always so important. But what's also really critical are like knowing when the planets are moving through the signs and what they're doing. And so we are going to have Venus entering Capricorn on November 5th. And on that same day, Mercury is going to enter Scorpio. So there's a lot of planetary shift happening right up front at the beginning of the month and taking us into new directions for love and money with Venus and Cap, and communication with Mercury going into such. So that's kind of the first thing that's on my mind. Yeah. Do you have feelings about Venus and Capricorn?
I've actually been thinking about this all day. I think
Nice.
about Venus and Capricorn all day. Well, because the last time Venus went retrograde, it was in Gemini.
Mhm.
And it was very much about, well, for me personally, I felt it was very much about thinking. It was more mental. It was thinking about, your relationships to other, and money and aesthetics, but this feels more grounded. This feels more real, like tangible. Um, and the ways in which, I don't know why, but I feel like it's the ways in which we think about the structures of how we make money, and what we have to do to get it, and how much we have to work for money, and also thinking about beauty in a very, because I think of Capricorn as a little bit of a old daddy archetype. Like, I was saying to you that I used to work in private equity. It's like the old man at the CEO that's like telling everybody what else to do. Which, if you like that archetype, this could be great for you. But for me, it feels a little bit like, oh, he's gonna tell me not to spend money.
Yeah, yeah. It is an interesting place for Venus because she does love to shop and express herself with her possessions. And Capricorn is, you know, a restricted kind
Yeah.
of place. It's a little bit darker too. And so, you know, I think that one thing that we can say about Venus and Capricorn is that it's like, you know, I think it's always helpful to think about a love language that's being expressed with the sign in question. And so with Venus and Capricorn, the love language is going to be about taking responsibility in love and partnership, and really just actually doing the thing that you say you're going to do with your partners, and being present with what a kind of mature partnership might look like. So
I
yeah,
love
it's
that.
not, yeah, I think that's a better way to think about it than like, you know, worrying, because I do see people being like, oh no, Venus is leaving Sagittarius and going into Capricorn. You know, yeah, it might not be like a party, but it might be an interesting time to get in touch with like something a little bit more mature about love for us. So yeah.
I actually have a question for you, and it might be very psychological. How much of our own experiences do we project onto these archetypes, like
Mhm.
onto these planets? Because somebody who has had a healthy relationship with authority and a father figure would look at Venus and Capricorn and be like, oh, it's loving, it's like responsible, holds the container, whereas like I'm like, it's so restrictive.
Well, I think that I too have issues with authority, but my Venus is in Scorpio, so I'm like, these people are my,
Wow.
yeah. um, and so that, yes, that's a whole other conversation. But in my experience, like, yeah, we do, like, we're filtering our life through the archetypes of these signs and planets. And so that's completely fine to do if you're like somebody who consumes astrology and is like, you know, using it for yourself, and knowing that, you know, the planets and signs are a kind of way of finding yourself in the world. So makes total sense to do that. As a practitioner, like as somebody who reads for other people, I feel like I have a kind of Hippocratic oath to uphold and
Mhm.
try to like, you know, never sugarcoat anything, but give people the most like fertile expression of something when I'm delineating it for them. So, you
Yeah,
know, like I do agree with you that Venus and Cap could be like, don't eat that, you know, don't enjoy this thing. It could be
yeah.
very constricting. But, you know, it really is also about like learning what we can do with that Capricorn archetype, which is, you know, about being concise and
Right.
being responsible. So yeah.
But also, what I love about Capricorn, if there was something, is that it's ruled by Saturn, which in Greek mythology is Chronos. So it's like, if you can hold off for a little bit, the reward at the end is bigger than just the momentary pleasure. And so what I'm thinking with Venus and Capricorn is also, um, like, be patient and really see if this is the thing that you want. Because also, too much of a good thing, like if this was Venus in like a Jupiterian sign, maybe everyone would be like, yeah, like going crazy and eating too much and spending too much. But maybe Capricorn is like, no, like you really need to check yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little bit of like a kind of stop along the path of Venusian experience. I think that Venus in Capricorn has such a stern eye for beauty. And so like, it's not going to be again, like, Venus in Capricorn is like the opposite of like an Ibiza beach party, right? Like that's the antithesis. That's the antithesis of Venus in Capricorn.
Yeah.
Venus in Cap really loves like art or antiques or furniture or like aesthetics of people that are classic and look like they have history to them. And so like that's the kind of beautiful thing about that Saturn influence, is that Saturn is about time and kind of holding off and letting things ripen, letting things mature. That's another way that we can kind of think about this planetary influence.
And okay, so it's moving into Capricorn for 2 weeks, and then it goes into a shadow, and then it goes into the retrograde in December. What can people start to prepare themselves for? Because retrograde doesn't mean that you're going to lose money.
Mhm.
It's just a reflection time.
Yeah. It's crazy that we're ending this year with a Venus retrograde. Like, oh, okay, thank you. Yes, I want this. Venus retrograde is interesting because it happens less frequently than Mercury retrograde. So it's a little bit more like deep, or maybe a little bit more intensely felt. It does not mean that you will lose money. It just is signifying a time where we have to kind of like pause around the themes of that planet, and really think about what we've achieved so far, first of all, what we've accomplished, what has been great, and maybe what is no longer serving us in a very thorough way, since Venus is in Capricorn. So my advice to people would be like, look at the house in your chart that has Capricorn on its cusp. And this is going to be the place where Venus's retrograde is going to impact you. So that's going to be the area of life where you might be feeling this retrograde, which is going to have you reevaluating your relationships and reevaluating how you spend money, how you consume, and how you take responsibility for your own heart, right? With Venus, the love goddess in Capricorn. So that would be my advice if I had to kind of like lay it out and be like, heads up, this is a thing.
Yeah.
Uh, mhm.
And it feels super powerful because it's going to be conjunct Pluto, I think next year.
Yeah.
I feel like that's going to be very significant.
I'm very curious. I think it could be amazing. Like Venus conjunct Pluto is like, the revolutionary aspect of love, right? That's like a like idea that we can attach to it. Or again, the kind of death and rebirth of our own ways of consuming and loving and deciding what is of value. Venus is so much about determining the worth of things. And so, there could also be some kind of financial component to it, like for our collective. Apparently we're in a bull market. I'm not really a stock person, but there are things that are happening that are volatile, due to Uranus in Taurus, influencing finances. But Pluto and Venus are also very much about wealth. And so it could be really, really interesting in a lot of different ways. So yeah, I'm
When
not a financial astrologer, but yeah.
Yeah, when you said that about love, I heard Celine Dion's song, The Power of Love.
Yes, exactly. Is she a Capricorn? I don't know.
I
I
don't
should
know.
have
I haven't looked up her chart, but I will after this.
no. Okay, yeah, definitely good follow-up info.
Yeah. So, okay, so we have a new moon in Scorpio, which is right at the beginning of this month. Do you have
Mhm.
any like
Oh
things to
yeah.
say about it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, I love a new moon. I love my Scorpio archetype. The new moon is happening on the 4th of November, and it's going to be happening at 12 degrees Scorpio. So the sun and moon will be conjunct at 12 degrees Scorpio. They're also going to be hanging out with Mars, who is also in Scorpio, not conjunct, but just co-present with him. But most importantly, this new moon is going to be opposing Uranus. And so this is a very interesting, again, like, time of maybe planting seeds of change in our own Scorpionic perspectives. Uranus is that planet that talks so much about change and progress, but surprise and things taking us, by sudden turn.
Yeah.
So there's definitely an opportunity here with the new moon with the new moon opposite Uranus, to be using it as something to like push off of, to really initiate deep change. And I think that that's the best way to put it to its use. But you'll see people talking about like this powerful new moon in Scorpio opposite year. I'm sure that people are going to be obsessed with it because it's really important right now. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking for that.
I'm excited to see what comes out in the collective
Mm-hmm,
because I
mm-hmm,
feel like it's a lot of like awakening moments, like, oh my God.
mm-hmm. Yes. And I think we're kind of headed towards that, like the United States is moving into its Pluto return. People, who apparently weren't aware of like the abuse of power in this country are now becoming aware, as though it wasn't totally obvious before, but whatever. Um, so here we are.
Everybody awakens in their own time.
No, yes. And so it's been, we're kind of being pushed in that direction. So yeah, like, the biggest big deal astrology in my point of view of this year are the squares that we're having between Saturn and Uranus. Saturn is in Aquarius, Uranus is in Taurus for anyone listening. And, if Saturn represents our structure, our government, our bureaucracies, our foundations of society and patriarchy, Uranus is this kind of like queer outsider who's like,
Yes.
you don't need that structure. you can DIY this government thing and make a new one. It's fine. And like, yeah, there are things that need to shift. So that has been the kind of undercurrent of this year, people wondering why it's been so intense. It's a massive moment of restructuring very foundational things about how we all live. So yeah, lucky us, I think. But it's just an interesting moment on many levels. Yeah.
I'm excited. I love the planet Uranus. It's on my ascendant.
Me
And
too.
oh, really?
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
I
No,
love
see, energy attracts like.
that.
Energy
Mhm.
does not lie. Well, I love the energy because I'm just like the person waiting in the background, like, come on, come on, come on, like,
Do
when are they
it.
gonna see it?
Yes, I love it. I know it's like that placement, I think, gives you the ability to kind of see that things can obviously easily be different. It's just
Yes,
like the other people that need to get on board. So it
yes,
is pretty, yeah, I think it's a good weirdo placement. That's
yeah.
usually what I say about it. Yeah, I love it.
It has like very Promethean energy and a ability to see beyond time and space, I feel.
Oh, absolutely. It's perfect for all of those things. And, the Promethean component is so interesting, like, bringing new light to life, bringing new ways of seeing and new ways of being is just like very, very, very magical in its own way. So yeah, love that. Uranus on the ascendant too can be like a little bit of static electricity in the aura, I feel, as we move through. But that's okay.
Which I think is why I had to move into a lot of trees because I needed something to like bring
Yes.
it back down.
Yes, absolutely. I know I love living in cities because I just get so like inspired by, just the kind of chance element of the city aspect. But like right now I'm living in a very woodsy area and it is super calming and it's quiet to sleep at night, which is pretty
Mm,
good, pretty important because I'm in my 30s now and I need to sleep. So this is how it is. Yeah. 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 So that new moon is going to be definitely very interesting. I would say that this month as well, on the 10th of November, Mars is going to be squaring Saturn. So that's definitely going to be a crunchy day to kind of look out for. And by crunchy, I don't mean like, granola. I mean, like, it's going to be a little bit of a energetic crunch, with the planet of action, Mars being squared by Saturn. There's always this kind of feeling of being like gate kept from our goals because Saturn slows down Mars, who just wants to race forward. So that's something I have my eye on for this month, for sure. And yeah, I think that there were a couple of Mars Saturn squares last year as well,
Yeah,
when Mars was in Aries, and that was like very intense.
very intense.
So yeah, yeah.
You could like feel it in the air.
Yeah, I think like, a lot of people are feeling like they want things to shift, but things aren't shifting. And so the most we can do when the cosmos is reflecting that, yeah, it might be a little bit slower than you want, is to just prepare and have a plan
Mhm.
of how to soothe ourselves and, stay grounded, and patience is so hard to practice. And I'm not just telling everyone be patient, because that sucks to hear,
Mhm.
but it's definitely like part of the energy right now that we're building towards, like figuring out what it means to actually take stock of what's here before we can move forward. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Mars is in Scorpio, which
Mhm.
is in its home sign, square to Saturn in Aquarius in its home sign, both fixed signs. And it sounds pretty intense already. What are some remedies people can do? Because we can't obviously bury our heads in the sand.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it's really interesting with both of these signs being in their home signs. Like there is a lot of information here about that's my cat Federico. He's just
Hi,
taking a walk. He's
Federico.
a Leo. He doesn't care about anyone's privacy. Not that Leos feel that way. He's just very nosy. Um, yes. So Mars square Saturn. Yeah, it's going to be deeply felt. I would say like things are going to feel like maybe we can't move forward a little bit, but you still can do things that keep you active. So if it's accessible to you, doing movement that gets your heart and blood moving, right? Like Mars is so much about the body and action and our heart and pumping blood and kind of being embodied in that way. So anything from like kickboxing to running to just taking a brisk walk, getting our energy out in mundane ways when the Mars is squaring Saturn, when we can't move in like a greater fashion, I think could be a really good way. I always try to do that for myself. Not that I'm like love doing exercises, but this is a helpful tool for sure to just keep you feeling like, okay, I have a body, I'm moving, and this is my experience, and I can access this kind of change. I can change my mood a little bit, or I can change my environment a little bit. Just keeping that in mind, I think could be a good tool.
Great, amazing. So everybody, November 10th, maybe you want to take that day to do something active, not
Yeah.
get into arguments with people.
I think that if you get in fights with people on that day, they will go nowhere and you will feel very frustrated. Like
Mhm.
that Saturn is kind of like a brick wall that we can't penetrate. And it'll make us feel like our actions are just exhausting us if we're trying to kind of achieve something against an authority figure. So yeah, for those of us with issues with with power figures, just be kind to yourself on that day. It's definitely not a day to wear yourself down. So yeah, I think like, there are a couple of other points in November that look kind of juicy to me if we have the space and time to chat about them. How are you
Yeah.
feeling?
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Um, so we're going to have, I think, let's talk about maybe a couple of days that'll feel a little bit lighter or maybe a little bit more fertile. I am absolutely loving the Mercury trine to Neptune that will happen on November 18th.
Mhm.
So that feels very exciting to me. Thinking all about the ways in which we can actually maybe facilitate like art and communication and compassion, with Mercury and Neptune both being in water signs, Mercury being in Scorpio at that time, and Neptune's in Pisces. This is going to be a kind of psychic day and a really good day for anybody's art practices if they have one. So yeah, artists and feelers, mark that on your calendar. Yeah. Um, and I think too that at the end of the month, we're going to witness a sextile from Venus to Neptune. So Venus is going to, yes, be in Capricorn, sextiling Neptune at this moment. And like that to me is just so tender and romantic and very interested in like, it's kind of like Baroque or poetic or something like that. It's like very rich sort of love and expression. So it's a good day to write poetry. It's a good day to tell someone how you feel about them. Keep that with you. I think that'll be a very kind of magical moment. I love Venus Neptune aspects. I think they're very important to
We
take note of.
just had a square. Do you
Yes.
also like the square aspects?
No.
No?
I think that I think it depends on maybe how it's impacting your chart, but no, the square can be lovely and very interesting for sure. It's going to kind of put this Neptunian fog around Venus, who likes to be in her body. It kind of transports us to something more psychedelic or kind of technicolor about like our experiences, which is very interesting. So on its worst day though, a Venus square to Neptune can make you feel like you don't know what you want. And so that can be, if you're struggling with that kind of theme already, it can feel a little bit hard. But overall, any Venus Neptune configuration is definitely very interesting and creative to me. Good for dreaming as well.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah,
like it.
love it. Wonderful. Yeah. So I think that that's kind of, we could go day by day, but it's definitely, there's a lot just working with these kinds of high points of energy throughout the month. And I'm excited to see what unfolds.
Yeah, so thank you for going through that. I just marked on my my calendar here your notes. So it sounds like November is going to be very dynamic. If there was a word to describe it, it's very supercharged and not in a good or bad way, but just supercharged. And
Yeah.
it's going to call you in to make some internal shifts within yourself because it is Scorpio for half of the month. But then when we get into, oh, the sun moving into Sagittarius,
That's going to happen on the 21st.
21st,
Mhm.
it's going to be more um like looking out, you think? What is
Yeah, yeah. So, if you can picture it like, in Scorpio season, it's almost like the sun goes into the underworld. We go underground a little bit.
Mhm.
When the sun is reaching towards Sagittarius and finally enters Sag, it's like we kind of are back in the day world after taking this underworld journey. And so, yeah, it's like about feeling expanded, seeing how far that horizon line actually goes. I saw long time ago, an astrologer, Annabelle Gatt, who's awesome. I love her work. She just was like, here's a Sagittarius season exercise. Look out your window and just try to find the farthest point that you can
Mhm.
see and note what it is and really like connect with that image and do it every day of Sag season and see how it kind of expands your perspective. To me, that sounds like a really lovely way to mitigate anxiety when you're feeling kind of hemmed in. But as Sagittarius is so much of like the long view, it literally just feels like that's a great tool. So yeah, we're coming back up and feeling like we can re-engage the world. Sagittarius is very much about like the kind of, I don't know, like higher roads to education. And I put that in quotes because all education is valid. So I don't know. But, Sag stuff can talk about philosophy, spirituality, religion, divination, even. And so there's this kind of like really robust and energized sort of activity with Sagittarius season.
Yeah. I love that, and it makes me so hopeful. But when you were talking about that, it's like sometimes you can't appreciate being in the daylight when you're not fully in the depths of the dark as well, which is kind of how we started our conversation, is that depth and the going into the underworld is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, all of these moments exist in the astrological wheel for a reason, because these are all of the components of life and human experience. So, yeah, we wouldn't appreciate the kind of brilliant light of like a Jupiterian moment, like the sun in Sag, as much, probably if it wasn't preceded by Scorpio season, which is way more internal and a little bit darker, right? So I think that one of the kinds of beautiful things about the Sagittarius Scorpio dynamic is that Scorpio is so curious about what is true on an internal level. Sagittarius is curious about what's true externally. And we have to have a balance between those two in order for us to really kind of see things clearly, right? Both are kind of wisdom, but they do different things or they're organized differently. So,
Right.
they seem like they don't get along, like they seem like they contradict each other, but we're all moving in this direction anyway. So I think that that's important too.
That's so beautiful. And Pluto being the modern ruler of Scorpio, I heard an astrologer say that Pluto literally burns shit away and brings you down to the depths of the underworld to expose you to the truth. It
Mhm.
like cuts away all the bullshit. And you mentioned America going into its Pluto return, and I think that's what we're going through now is this chaos of really seeing the truth of what has been happening.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's unavoidable. And astrologers have had this kind of, idea about the Pluto return on their minds for a long time. And yeah, it's necessary though, and so humans don't ever have a Pluto return, but like, countries do or empires do. And so nothing lasts forever in the way that it is, originally formed. And we need Pluto to kind of show us where things have become abusive or where things have become unsustainable. And so I'm a fan of Pluto energy. I'm very receptive to the idea that we do need to have that kind of like, bringing us into the depths of experience in order to understand what's real. But again, my Venus in Scorpio is very loud and she's conjunct Pluto. So she,
Whoa!
it's
Oh
very
my
silly.
gosh!
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. So it's funny, like, I'm like, oh, I'm a Virgo, but I think that there's a lot. There's
I
more.
think your Venus and Pluto and Scorpio are definitely dominating.
Yes, they're conjunct my midheaven. So they're hanging out. They want to know about everything and they want to talk.
Wow.
Yeah.
Travis Barker has Venus, Pluto, and Libra,
Oh, cute. I
which is
feel like
like
that makes sense. Yeah.
the way he loves Courtney and like the way the what you were saying about love language. I mean, come on. I'm like, I need a Venus and Pluto in my life.
It's about devotion and like,
Yeah.
that can look really serious, but devotion is like,
He's
it's
all in, all
yeah,
in.
I love it. I love it
Yeah.
so much. Yeah.
Last question. What? Because you mentioned Placidus, and that's how I first learned, but then I switched to whole sign houses because my astrology teacher at the time was like, no, he was so against Placidus,
I
and now
know.
I'm on whole sign system. So, what do you use now, and like, what do you find is more resonant with you?
Yeah. So it's such a funny thing that some teachers are like, this is the one,
Oh
because
my gosh.
I don't know about that, but and no disrespect to your teacher at all.
It's
Because,
okay.
yeah, everyone has their style, but yeah, like when I was learning astrology, the only chart system that I could kind of learn on was Placidus, because whole sign astrology like just wasn't really in the air. Right now we're having this big boom of traditional astrologers being kind of like in the spotlight, which is really cool and exciting, but that's not how it was in, 2008 when I was really getting my hands on it. So Placidus I learned on. I like don't know if it's my Gemini moon. I use both. I use both in my consultations with people. I always let my clients dictate the house system because I literally think that the house's meanings don't change, right? But the planets in their placements will shift
Mhm.
oftentimes. But if someone comes to me and they're looking for support and they really know their chart in one house system and they're going through it, I'm not going to rewrite their chart for them. That does not help, in my perspective. But if you're meeting me for the first time and you don't have a preference, I'm going to open your chart in whole sign. And that's just because I feel like it is extremely resonant for so many people that I work with. And I also like to use traditional astrology techniques to figure out timing sequences for people. So you have to use whole sign to use those techniques. And it's our oldest house system. It's kind of cool to think about the ways that ancient people would have been
Mhm.
reading the sky and us still doing that now in 2021. But yeah, do you like your whole sign chart? Like, do you feel like that resonates more for you?
So it didn't for a long time. And honestly, when he first, I want to give background. He was definitely a classical astrologer. Like he didn't even talk about Uranus, Pluto, Neptune. It was
Mhm.
only up until Saturn, and that also made me confused.
Yeah.
So I was very resistant at first because I was like, this makes no sense to me. Um, my moon used to be here and now it's not there. And now learning more and also learning more of like the predictive techniques, it does make more sense to me. But I think that for me personally, um, I think both work because
Mhm.
sometimes I feel the impacts of the energetic shift of the transits almost after they've left a certain house.
Mhm.
Like they make their mark, they do their thing, and then I feel it like a month later. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to stay aware of and like kind of play with a little bit. And if certain people love Placidus, I think Placidus is cool because it gives us things like intercepted houses, for example. It gives us a kind of like messiness, which is definitely a part of contemporary life. But the whole sign, like I at first was like, oh, whole sign, it makes everything neat. I don't like that. I don't want that to be how my chart looks, but I also, had to accept that like it was definitely legit. So, this is something that I love using now. I think it's really beautiful. Um, and yeah, like that's the interesting thing about classical astrology is that practitioners who don't bring in the outer planets, like we're living in a very outer planet kind of world. You know what I mean? Like we have Pluto, we
Yes,
have Uranus, and we have Neptune all around us. And
yes,
so why would you ignore those archetypes?
yes. They're
Yeah.
here. They've always been here. And
Mhm.
Eris, and I am
Mhm.
finding that I'm more drawn to like feminist type astrologers who also don't talk in these binaries about planets. And I just don't resonate with like, I personally don't resonate with planets being malefic per se. I just think that these planets and energies show us different love languages. Some are a little harsher than others, but I don't think they're out to get us.
I agree. I agree. And like, the Hellenistic point of view or the traditional point of view, it can be really pessimistic, especially if you're
Very
reading some of the,
pessimistic.
the old texts. It's like everything is about, but I think it's just because that's how life was back then. Like
Mhm.
people had to avoid death, destruction, and illness. And so we're living in a different world. Now we've got the outer planets as our kind of harbingers of transformation and change. And yeah, we have to bring them in. They're very important. So yeah, I blend the two. Again, Gemini moon, guilty. Like I can't not bring in, but always with the intention of just illuminating something for my client, and sometimes it's the case that a person comes in with their chart and they're like, "Oh, I read in Placidus. That's what I want." And I'm like, okay, we pull up the chart and I start explaining, the delineations. And they're like, I never really understood this placement. Like, it doesn't make sense that my sun is in the first house. Like, I don't feel like I'm a solar person. And I was like, and I will be like, let's pop it into whole sign and see, oh, your sun moves into the 12th house. How do you resonate with this delineation? And it makes sense. So it's kind of cool to be able to teach and show people that, there are so many ways to make, I think, astrology connect with us. And something as simple as like shifting the houses can bring real connection to them in their chart. So yeah, interesting.
I love how you're so flexible and you're not just like, this is the way it is. Like that, it's definitely your Gemini moon. And it's so interesting that you are a Gemini moon because I'm calling in a Gemini moon man for like my future person because I realize that I need a air moon because I'm sapiosexual. Like I get turned on by intellectual conversations. And so I was like, I think I want a Gemini moon because they're just so curious and so like, flexible with life. And the other astrologer that I connected with, Colin from Queer Cosmos, do you know
Oh
him?
yeah, yeah, love his work. Yeah, yeah.
Yorker and a Gemini moon.
Oh,
And I
oh.
think he's a Capricorn moon, Gemini sun.
Okay, yes, he is a Gemini. I know that about him. That's so cute though. That's very cute. Yeah, so it's like the Gemini energy is getting
Yeah.
closer.
I was like, it's working. Just like astrologers.
So funny. I wonder too, like, a Virgo moon might suit you because in my experience, like those people are so smart and so weird and curious. And yeah, that might be something to consider, not to draw you off track with your Gemini moon project.
Oh no,
But
I'm open to suggestions. Thank you very much. I mean, I love that we can talk about this is why I love Gemini moons, because we can talk about art, astrology, my love life,
I love it.
no return.
It's all here. It's all here in my very busy brain. So yeah, I think that that's just how it is. And like, I do love that astrology kind of makes space for all of that too. But I'm very grateful to you for opening this portal up for me to give all these different perspectives. So thank you so
Yes.
much.
Oh my gosh, it was such a pleasure to speak to you. I will link all of Christina's information in the show notes. She actually made a code for us. Yay! 10% off with the code AWAKEN on your services. Do you want to talk about your services?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. Right. So I guess if you've liked this conversation and you feel connected to my style or you're just curious, you can find me on Instagram at Eighth House Astro. That's my handle. And it's all spelled out with two H's. Ugh, should make an easier handle, but it's Eighth House Astro. Or you can find me at my website, which is just CristinaFarella.com. But I am a practicing astrologer, so that means that I meet with people for consultations, really in an ongoing fashion. Some people I meet with once a year, some people I meet with every other month to check in with their cosmos and kind of give them guidance and support for whatever it is they need, whatever it is they're going through. So I use, my traditional astrology techniques, as well as, good old fashioned common sense. And I love to bring in art, history, and myth into our conversations. So that's kind of my style. But, I think in addition to that, I also offer an online astrology community called the Astral Arcade, and it's just my Patreon, but I gave it a fancy name, which has, it is a community. We have a cute little Discord, and at the various tiers, there's different, levels of engagement. At the very basic tier, though, you have access to the entire learning library that I've created, which has like educational resources, things I've written, meditations, videos, and kind of ongoing, accumulation of stuff, private podcast, and I meet with my patrons at a certain tier for the full and new moon to do some magic and intention setting. So feels like a lot, again, that Gemini moon thing, but in general, if you are looking for some cosmic guidance, I would love to connect.
Yay! Thank you, Christina, and happy November, everyone.
Happy November, happy Scorpio and Sag season, and take good care.